CEOs are the highest paid people in the world, period. But unlike most of us who take our salaries in cash, CEOs generally receive the vast majority of their compensation in stock. For example, in 2020, Tim Cook was paid $281 million, but only $3 million of this was cash. This means that only about 1% of Tim's compensation was in cash. Now, that's already quite extreme in comparison to us average people, but founder CEOs generally take the strategy to a whole nother level. Everyone from Elon Musk and Steve Jobs to Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, and Sergey Brin have all taken $1 cash salaries in the past. This isn't to say that they weren't paid at all, though. They often receive hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of stock. Elon Musk, for example, recently unlocked a $23 billion compensation tier. Even on the years that these guys don't get a stock compensation, they're compensated in the form of travel, security, housing, and so on. But what's even the point of this? Why take a $1 salary? $1 salaries aren't a new phenomenon by any means. In fact, they've been around since the early 1900s, but the first time they gained significant prominence was during World War II. Unlike the $1 CEOs today who receive extraordinary amounts of compensation through other avenues, the original $1 CEOs actually only earned $1. Well, kind of. You see, during the height of World War II, the US government was struggling to recruit talented individuals. Much of the young talent was sent to the war while the others preferred to work at private companies. So, a few prominent CEOs decided to help out the government for free and set an example. This included executives like Philip Reed, the CEO of GE, and William Knudsen, the CEO of GM. These guys were basically volunteering for the government, but the law prevents the government from hiring unpaid volunteers. So they of course decided to pay them $1 per year, and these guys became known as the $1-a-year men. It should be noted though that these guys were still being paid their regular salaries from their companies, so it's not like the total compensation was only $1. But their work at the government specifically was truly only awarded $1. By the end of the war, the US employed $1,000 men, and these guys served in all sorts of positions. William Knudsen, for example, started off in the National Defense Advisory Commission before becoming Lieutenant General and then the Director of Production. William was an invaluable resource in this role because his knowledge of running efficient factories and scaling up production were unmatched. Before the US joined the war, they were producing just 3,000 aircraft per year. But by the end of the war, they were producing 300,000 aircraft per year. Cargo and Navy ship production also went through the roof, which helped the war effort astronomically. After the war ended though, most of these guys returned to their original jobs full-time or they retired. And most people forgot about the $1 salary up until 1979. At the time, the automotive industry had been devastated by the oil crisis, and the company that was hit the hardest was Chrysler. Things got so bad that Chrysler needed a bailout from the government. And to show that the company was serious about spending the bailout money effectively, Chrysler CEO Lee Iacocca decided to take a $1 salary. If you're not familiar with this man, he's an absolute icon within the automotive industry, and he made $1 salaries the default PR move for wealthy CEOs. The next prominent example of the $1 salary is Steve Jobs. When Steve joined Apple in 1996, the company was on the brink of bankruptcy, so it's no wonder he settled for a $1 salary, especially given that he was already a billionaire thanks to Pixar. And as the dot-com bubble burst, we saw dozens of CEOs follow his lead. But this was really the last time that the $1 salary was truly a sacrifice. Since then, the $1 salary has become more of a strategy than a sacrifice. One of the greatest perks of taking a $1 cash salary is that you can receive significantly larger compensation through other avenues, while also minimizing public scrutiny. As you might have already guessed, on average, $1 CEOs are paid significantly more than regular CEOs. On average, $1 CEOs do earn $623,000 less in salary, $941,000 less in bonus, and $117,000 less in other forms of cash compensation. This adds up to a total of $1.68 million less in cash compensation. However, on average, they also earn $515,000 more in options, $1.5 million more in stock, and $1.5 million more in other forms of non-cash compensation. This adds up to an extra $3.5 million worth of non-cash compensation. This means that the average $1 CEO earns $1.87 million more than the average CEO in terms of total compensation. Not only does $1 cash salaries help these CEOs minimize public scrutiny, but it's the main reason that they're able to earn so much in the first place. Here's the thing, Many of the biggest companies in the world run at little to no profit, so they can't afford to pay massive cash salaries. Take Tesla for example. It wasn't until 2020 that Tesla posted their first full year of profitability. Do you really think that Tesla could afford to pay Elon a few $100 million per year, much less $23 billion? Of course not. Even now, Tesla only has $17.5 billion in cash, so if they were to pay Elon $23 billion, they would literally burn through their entire cash reserves. Even paying him a few billion in cash would be an extremely irresponsible move. But if we're talking about options or stock, that's actually doable. Here's the thing, when companies give employees and executives stock compensation, they don't actually pay for the stock. And it's not like the company buys the shares from the stock market and then awards them to the employees. Rather, companies are allowed to create shares out of thin air as long as it abides by their employee or executive compensation plans. Now, just because the company creates the shares out of thin air doesn't mean that the stock is free. Rather, all of the existing shareholders of the company are basically agreeing to dilute their own stakes to pay for the stock compensation. For example, when Elon was paid $23 billion, Tesla's valuation hovered at around $1 trillion. So, shareholders had to dilute their stakes by about 2.3% for Elon to get paid such a massive amount. But that's an extreme example. Even Elon doesn't usually get paid tens of billions. Usually, his pay is closer to something like $500 million. And compared to Tesla's peak market cap, that's only 0.05% dilution. As you can see, stock compensation allows companies to offer extraordinary salaries without compromising their own balance sheets. And if you think about it, it's truly quite brilliant. But what it's not is a sacrifice. Aside from earning a far greater salary, many speculate that $1 salaries allow CEOs to get away with a much smaller tax bill. The idea is that executives don't have to pay taxes at all until they sell. So they'll only have to pay capital gains taxes as opposed to ordinary income tax, which is a lot higher. But this isn't actually true. Executives do have to pay ordinary income tax when they exercise their stock options. And given the magnitude of their salaries, they usually end up paying 40–50% in income tax. Elon, for example, had to pay $11 billion in taxes last year. Now, Elon cleverly made it seem like he was selling stock because people wanted him to. But really, he had to. You see, Elon had stock options that translated to 22.8 million shares of Tesla, and all of these options were expiring in August, meaning that he had to exercise or sell these options by August. Whenever you exercise or sell options though, it counts as an ordinary income event, and given that each share of Tesla was worth over $1,000 at the time, exercising 22.8 million shares was equivalent to $23.5 billion worth of ordinary income. At a 40% tax rate, this translates to $10.7 billion in taxes. There's really no way of getting around this, and Elon only had until August to exercise these stock options. So he decided to sell while Tesla was near its all-time highs, and he also made it seem like he was doing his civic duty, when really, he was forced to pay a large tax bill if he wanted to exercise his options. Now that Elon has paid ordinary income tax on this stock, he can hold for a long time and he'd only have to pay capital gains taxes in the future. But this isn't really a tax advantage. If he was paid $23.5 billion in cash, it wouldn't have really changed anything. He would have still had to pay ordinary income tax on the initial payment, and he could have still benefited from long-term capital gains tax if he invested the cash. The only time that you can avoid ordinary income tax altogether is when you get equity from founding a company, and the original value of your shares is zero. Thus, the ordinary income tax on those shares is also zero, and you only have to pay capital gains tax. Whenever you're paid with stock that actually has value though, you do have to pay ordinary income tax. Now, some of you guys who earn stock compensation may be saying that you didn't have to pay ordinary income tax on your stocks, and the likely reason for this is that your stock was awarded in the form of ISOs or incentive stock options. ISOs are special stock options that are only taxed capital gains. But the only problem with ISOs is that they're capped at $100,000 per year. So this benefit isn't really applicable to the executives that we're talking about. And the idea that $1 CEOs can just avoid ordinary income tax altogether is simply not true. While $1 CEOs may not be able to get a tax break by taking their compensations in stock, they do get one more massive advantage, which is stakeholder morale. There's very few things that give shareholders more confidence than knowing that the CEO is all in. And most CEOs are more than all in, given that they borrow money on their stakes to actually fund their lives. This means that if the underlying stock went to zero, the CEO would be screwed as they would literally lose 99.9% of their wealth. Take Elon for example. Bloomberg estimates that he only has $3 billion in cash even after selling tens of billions of dollars worth of stock. This means that before he started selling Tesla late last year, he likely had less than $1 billion in cash. Now, this is not a bad amount by any means, and it's not like he's going to go homeless if his companies collapse. But I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to go from 300 billion to 300 million overnight. And this is likely extremely strong motivation to not let any of his companies go bankrupt. This isn't as big of a concern when we're talking about mature companies with solid cash flow. But for startups, CEOs taking $1 salaries is a strong commitment. For example, Amazon stock crashed 95% after the dot-com bubble. Jeff Bezos being all in during this time period was no doubt quite a statement. At the end of the day, $1 salaries came about due to times of hardship. But over time, they've evolved into a marketing ploy and a strategy for earning bigger compensations. They don't have a bunch of tax advantages like many assume, but it does do one job better than anything else. When a CEO takes all of their salary in stock, they don't get paid unless shareholders also get paid. And thus far, there has been no greater symbol of allegiance and loyalty to the shareholders than taking a $1 salary. Would you be willing to take your entire salary in stock? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you thought this video explained $1 salaries well. And of course, consider checking out our Discord community to suggest future video ideas and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.